everyone, my name is Kat Savage and I'm a professional artist, clinical hypnotherapist and well-being expert working with those in the creative arts sector. In my line of work, I get to meet some amazing, colourful people, from actors to artists, people who live their lives by their own rules, fueled by passion and determination to bring their unique talents into the world. I wanted to discover what it took for people to leave the usual 9 to 5 and hop on a dream, to capture their bravest moments and share these meaningful conversations with you, so that together we can explore the ideas, emotions and moments that could potentially change our lives too. The Brave Moment podcast begins now, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, probably the bravest moment not only for my guests, but for the whole world. So let's keep talking. Have some fun and enjoy the show. This week on the show, we speak to multi-instrumentalist Colin Seddon about life in 3 of the UK's biggest and influential bands, In a Sense, Biting Tongues and 808 State. He takes us on a musical journey through Brazil, playing in the vibrant Rio Carnival, to going on tour with Bjork. With his humble and inspiring advice on beginning our own brave and creative adventures, it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to one of Manchester's finest musical revolutionaries, Colin Seddon. Hello, Colin, and welcome to the show.
Hello.
We're sat here today with a massive bucket of tea and a nice piece of cake in a wintry Cornwall coming into 2021. Crazy times for you and for me, being that we are creatives and musicians. So why don't you tell the audience how many musical instruments you play?
I actually don't know. It's a lot. If I categorise them, I play lots of things, percussion instruments that you hit or scrape or shake. And I play stringed instruments, so anything with strings on I can pick up generally, except that my bowing is rubbish. So so if I try and bow the double bass, it sounds like I'm sawing it in half. And I don't go anywhere near wind instruments, except for voice. Yeah. So I sing as well.
You're such a multi-talented man. Oh my goodness. And here I was just thinking that I was touching the surface with what you do, but I'm really impressed with everything that you do.
Oh, thank
Crazy
you.
Polymath, awesome person.
Well, it's polymath to polymath, this interview, isn't it?
I think creators have to be that way this year especially.
You have to be able to do everything. I think in musical career in general, you can't you can just go, I'm going to do one thing, but you've got to put so much into it. And it's such a lottery. There's so much luck involved, I think. So most of us, I think, do lots of things so that we increase our chances of being employed, I reckon.
I concur, absolutely and implicitly. Yeah. So I want to take you back in time. And you are now a child. And were you creative as a child? Were you drawn to music then, or did it come later on in life? I
was always really interested in music. My dad had a load of Beatles records and things that he gave me as my first records. I had my first dance set recorder with the stacker thing, so you could put lots of 45s on there, and they dropped down automatically, and it'd play each one. So I think the first record he gave me was "Please Please Me" by the Beatles. Awesome. And I can still remember the smell and the sound of the scratches, the whole ritual of it, and I was always fascinated by it. And I think when I got to about 11 or 12, I just was drawn to sort of David Bowie, Aladdin Sane, and that track Driving Saturday, which had that do 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 do, and I never knew it was played by bongos at the time. It was actually, and I just this sound, I didn't know what it was, but it was very magical. And every time I listen to it, even now, I'm transported back to that fascination. Even though it's completely demystified now. I know what the sound was made by. I think the music you listen to at that time, it stays with you, you know. I think there are various turning points in your life where the music that you listen to at that point stays with you. And I think it's 11. For me, it was 11 and probably 18.
Can you remember what your very first single or your very first record that you bought was, and why? Why that one in particular?
Yeah, the first one I bought was probably that one I just said, actually, Driving Saturday by Bowie. And then me and my friend Jeff Garrett were really into David Bowie, and we just like wanted to dye our hair orange and have spiky on the top, and our parents wouldn't let us, you know. And so actually our real hairstyles were just like no dye, you know, just really boring flat haircuts, you know. And we looked nothing like the people we were idolising at the time, but we were transported into this kind of world. So that's the first. I think that was the first single I bought, and then the first album was probably Space Oddity by Bowie, which I saved up my pocket money.
You're so cool, Colin.
It sort of tied in with the whole space program at the time, and because I watched the moon landings on black and white telly and everything.
Unbelievable.
Which is just, and I was fascinated by the androgyny at that time.
Yeah.
You know, just the fact that he led the way in saying you don't have to look like that, you can look like this. You know? And I think, but I didn't really get into playing any instruments until I was about 14 or 15. Prior to that, I thought I was going to be a painter. I was really into visual art. You know,
oh my goodness!
Yeah. So, and then it just suddenly became really clear. Your dog is now licking my leg.
Cooper, come here. He's really getting quite into it.
It's quite a test. I think it's a test to see whether I can concentrate.
I'm just going to give him something to occupy his brain. Hang on.
So yeah, I was into visual art, and I think I was a bit of a geeky little child. You know, I decided to learn to touch type because my dad had a record, a 4-record set, with a fantastic cover actually. Imagine record covers in the 50s, you know, that like jazz record covers, you know, with sort of pointy stylized people typing and
brilliant,
and being in office, and I just decided that would be a really cool thing to do because I thought I was going to be a journalist like my dad.
It's so interesting. Everything you're saying, I'm having little pings in my mind because I'm thinking, yep, I wanted to be a writer. Yep, I wanted to be an artist. Yep, I wanted to be a musician. It seems to be that journey, doesn't it? When you're young and you're creative and you're imaginative. Try lots of different ideas out, yeah. And you don't really know. But I remember this sort of confidence, and it didn't matter whether I was going to be a journalist or whether I was going to be an artist. It's like, I don't think I'd had that vision of the future. I was just like, let's try this. And then so I learned to touch type, and who would have thought it would become so useful? Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. So here you are in your teens, you've picked up a bass guitar. Did you go on to study music then later, or was that something that didn't even cross your mind because you were still considering it a hobby?
Well, it did cross my mind, but because I came into it quite late, my music teacher, who was very classically orientated and old school music teacher, had already given up on me. Because I used to play havoc in his lessons and just mess about and chuck things across the room and be really naughty because I was bored.
Yeah.
So when I actually started playing bass guitar, it was nothing. It was despite him really. A mate of mine was playing in a band and they wanted a bass player, and they had a cellist called Bradley Grime. Isn't that a brilliant name? Bradley
Grime. Yeah. What do I hear today?
And they were called Equinox, and they were really into ELO. So Bradley Grime really wanted to be like the cellist in ELO. And so we played all these covers. And it's really funny, actually, because I remember doing a version of I'm a Man, which is that blues song, because I'm a man, spelled M, you know, but my voice hadn't broken yet.
Awesome.
So I was like, I'm a man! So there's me on the bass.
It's going to haunt me forever, that image.
Grappling with the idea of playing a bass line and singing at the same time and thinking, this is really hard. And so I did that for a bit. And then later on, I decided I wanted to learn to read music. So I thought the best way to do it would be to learn. We use double bass, but I didn't have a double bass. So I went to the teacher who'd given up on me, Mr. Holden, and said, I want to study double bass. And he kind of looked at me, you? But he was actually really helpful, and he gave me contact for another school which had a bass teacher who taught there. So I went for lessons there for a while, and then eventually found a guy at the RNCM who taught me. RNCM is Royal Northern College of Music. And he used to do things like discourage you from playing vibrato when you played the bass. So if you were playing a scale, lots of people hide behind the vibrato, so bend the notes and wobble them, so to mask their lack of intonation and precision. And he used to say, if you're playing a scale, you have to play it like it's the most beautiful piece of music you've ever played. It's not just C major, just so he'd demonstrate, and it sounded like this amazing piece of music when he played it, and I was like, wow, I wanted to be able to do that. So got it, like anything, you've got to stick with it. You've got to sound rubbish and accept that you sound rubbish and love the fact that you sound rubbish to get beyond it. And I think maybe I just wasn't motivated. I've recently taken up the pedal steel. Last year, when my father died, my dad died in April of that year, and it was obviously anybody's parents dying is a big thing. But for 5 years since his wife died, since my mum died, his wife died, he'd gone on a sort of Renaissance rampage. I don't know.
That's a good name for a band.
Yeah. And he sort of did everything, and he went to all the night classes he could go to, and did drama. Joined a choir, joined a writing group, and taught at one, and did loads, and just did everything. He was never in for 5 years, and really lived a life for his last 5 years. And I was massively inspired by that. And so 2019 became the year of the beginner for me, and so I learned to swim.
Did you not know how before then?
Badly.
Yeah.
And I'd lost my confidence and avoided the water, and so I decided to do that. And I decided to buy myself a pedal steel, and I don't know where it came from, but I just knew I'd had to learn one.
Can you describe to our listeners who don't know what a pedal steel is, it is?
A pedal steel is a kind of laptop guitar, so you could actually play a guitar in that way, but you use a metal bar instead of your fingers to make the notes on it. So you can slide. So like
it's like a real twangy American country thing, isn't it?
And so mine's got 8 pedals, and you can change lots of different notes with the pedals. Goodness. And it has these bars these knee levers, so you sort of push them with your knees. So you've basically got umpteen ways to change with different chords. So anyway, the reason I mention this is because it's an instrument that has taught me to be patient again and put me into beginner's mind. I think that's a kind of Buddhist or Zen term, isn't it? That idea of you're a beginner, start again, experience everything as if it's for the first time, and to accept that being rubbish, that being crap at something is part of the journey, so actually you see yourself get gradually better by increments. It's a moment by moment thing, isn't it? And they always say it's if you're gonna fail, just fail better the next time. Right. Make glorious mistakes. Yeah, fail better, and it's not a straight line graph either, because like you just when you're thinking I've cracked this, the next day you play something, it sounds awful. And then you have another day where it takes you completely by surprise, and you're struggling, and suddenly it goes, wow. And I have this rule for myself where I do 5 minutes a day. I have to do 5 minutes.
Brilliant.
And if it usually expands to longer. Sometimes I disappear for an hour. But if I do, sometimes I just do 5 minutes and go, that's me, I'm done.
Yeah.
And because I just commit, you turn up. Yeah. And that's really important, I think, because if you kind of think, I must do 3 hours a day, you're never going to do it.
No, you're always going to dream about it.
You can avoid it, because 3 hours, I haven't got 3 hours.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you back to 1983. Talk to us about 1983.
By that time, I was playing in a band called Biting Tongues. And we were we've tried to describe it a number of times, and it kind of comes out as messed up post-punk, funk, jazz.
That doesn't sound like you, Colin.
Noise. And we'd got to a point, because you have to remember it's only a few years since punk, and the whole punk thing was like you don't have to be able to play an instrument, you can just get on stage. So our band was kind of we were a bit snobby about if it was too tuneful or too nice, we chucked it out. I'd often take great delight in turning a treble up on my bass so it sounded more like a guitar,
dirgy,
and playing parallel semitones, so G sharp next to G, and just so we do a lot of things like that, but really sort of hypnotic rhythms. So everything was over these amazing drums, so it's very, very rhythmic. And we had a singer who wasn't really a singer; he was a writer, and he used to recite his William Burroughs inspired sort of words over the top. And so it was a really, it was kind of, I wouldn't even say it's before its time. It was just outside of any time. It was like it's got a bit of a following now. If you look online for the band, you can see quite a few people speak much more highly of it in retrospect than they did at the time. But we did some great gigs. So that with that band, we used to have these mad ideas. And because there's only 5 of us in the band, we had a kind of yes to everything, apart from if it was too nice. So somebody, I can't remember where it came from, we had a sax player called Howard. And I think he suggested that we got all the sax players we knew to come and do a gig at the Band on the Wall in Manchester, which was a regular gig for us, and lots of people would turn up. It was a really good shout, that gig, and we would hide them in the cellar and in the toilets and behind the bar and behind the curtains of the stage and
creepy saxophonists,
disguised as members of the audience, and then they just have their sax by their side in a case. And there was a piece where I think we started the gig with it actually, and so these sax players would just appear out the woodwork. And so we had this incredible improvised drone going on of all these saxes in the space. So that was a really interesting thing to do. And we often did similar things to that. And later on, when I got really into samba, I sort of did similar things where we had a gig in London where I think at the time I was working with a thing called Jam Samba at Estover. There was about 50 people in the samba band. So we hid 46 of the band on the stage in blackout.
Oh my goodness.
And the 4 of us sat in chairs and just jammed and sang songs in Portuguese and just played this samba. So we're kind of going, and just singing these songs. But there was a cue that I played on the pandero, which when the 46 players who were hidden on the stage heard, that we had the lights come on and suddenly they just go like that, and then the lights disappear again and we carry on playing as if nothing had happened, and people were like, what did that happen?
Did that happen? Am I on drugs?
And then I gave the same cue the second time, and this time they came in and it was full on, and we leapt onto the stage and suddenly had a 50-piece batterie. So these kind of theatrical elements, I just love that sort of flash mob element of music that you can do,
and it's so joyful, isn't it? It's so fun and mischievous, and that's what I love about it. Talking of fun and mischievous ways, Rio Carnival. Talk to us about Rio Carnival.
So I kind of started to form the roots of this band. It became known as the Inner Sense Percussion Ensemble.
That's a great name. Brilliant.
Which then we got rid of the word ensemble, so it became Inner Sense Percussion, and eventually we got rid of the word percussion, and it was just Inner Sense. And so we had 2 halves of what we did. We played on the street, and we played sort of carnival, samba, batucada, but just drums, and always got a massive reception, and we got moved on quite a lot because we blocked the street. So we were known as that band that plays outside Marks and Spencer's. But we also started to play gigs, and we were into sort of jazz and funk and things like that. So we linked that side of it as well. So there's kind of 2 sides to what we did. So that interest went on for quite a long time. And I was really keen to go to Brazil. I really wanted to find out more about it and go to the carnival. But
and the heart of the drumming as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't until 6 years later that I eventually managed to go. But I'm really glad I waited 6 years, because if I'd gone in 85, I wouldn't have known what the questions were. I wouldn't have known things. Amazing things would have passed me by. I wouldn't have understood them.
So, I mean, when you talk about those amazing things, what are you referring to?
Well, the subtleties of the way rhythms fit together, or the nuances of the language, or the use of metaphor in the lyrics, or the symbolism on the carnival floats that allude to the various syncretic religions that you have. And then there's all sorts of elements of the samba procession. There's 2 characters called the Porta Bandeira and Mestre da Sala. So they look like European aristocracy. So one of them carries a flag and does this sort of sweeping dance with the flag, and they dance around each other. And the woman has this enormous hooped dress, skirt, and of course that is alluding to the times when during Carnival you were allowed to lampoon your slave masters. You were allowed to, during the few days of Carnival, you were allowed freedom of speech, visually or lyrically or through words, and then that would all stop, of course, once Carnival was over. So all of those various nuanced aspects of Brazil I would not have spotted. But I got really bored at the Carnival, believe it or not, because the music is incredibly formulaic and repetitive, and all the I say bands, but they're like Carnival groups, sound the same. And so I just thought, I can't just watch this. I next time I come, I'll have to be part of it. So I sort of set the ball rolling, the wheels in motion. So I got to the next time I went, I played in the Carnival.
Wow!
With a group called Tradição, which means tradition, and we came third, which meant that we went out twice. So we played on the Tuesday night, came third by the end of the week, and then went out on the champions procession as well on the Saturday night of the same week. And
can you remember how you felt that week?
The Carnival itself has a lot of visual aspects missing. There's something about it where you get immersed in the sound world, and everything that goes on around you visually disappears or almost fades.
You're in that flow state.
Yeah, and I can't describe it. I don't think there's anything particularly magical or spiritual about it. I just think it is the way your senses work. And so there's a lot I don't remember visually, but there's all the bands before they start are in a compound, and you kind of like, everybody's kind of going, yeah, come on, we're gonna go, and so I'm kind of with these people, and anyway, eventually it's our moment, and the whistles are blowing, and it's like, come on, it's time to go, and then they bring in this cue, the drum called a heponique, just play, and the whole band just thunders in.
Wow.
And we're talking 500 drummers here. And this guy next to me, he's playing the same drum as me, he's playing a heponique as well. So we're going really fast on this drum. And he's playing his, and he shouts, and he's so excited. He goes like, ah, as he's playing like this. His stick goes straight through his drum skin. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you going to do for the rest of it? You're going to just have mime for a whole. And he starts asking me for my drum. And I'm like, no chance, mate. I've come all the way from Britain to do this. This is the moment I've waited for. I said, I feel for you, but you're not having my drum. So I think he turned his drum around and played the other head, For what it's worth, you can't hear the individual sounds. Everything blends into one. It's like, and there are these little drums called tambourines, which are like a brass section of funk band. So they play these lines that will sort of go, da, 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 like this. And they sound like one player.
So you're in Brazil, you've had this amazing time, but it's not the only place in the world that you've played music, has it? Because you were part of 808 State. Talk to us about that experience.
What had happened is that I'd left, in a sense, because I'd been with them for 9 years, maybe getting on for 10 years. A relationship with my girlfriend at the time had finished. So I moved. I'd been working with Knee High Theatre, and I'd developed a sort of relationship with them. So I'd kind of fallen in love with Cornwall, and so found myself deciding after I came back from Brazil to move to Cornwall. That's where I met Sue, my wife. And so I found myself in Cornwall, but the thing was that my reputation for Manchester didn't follow me. So I thought that people would know what I'd been doing and who Innocence was. And I've mentioned Innocence, and people going, "Who
that be? Do you want to pass me?"
Yeah.
We can take the mickey out of our local land, can't we?
So I literally had to start again. I was approaching schools and saying I can do a sample workshop, and they go, "Well, we don't know anything about you." So it's really hard to get any work. So I was without work. I was signing on for a couple of years, and so me and Sue were sitting there going, "Well, who do we know? Who's famous?" So I thought, well, I know Graham, and he said, we used to work with him. I said, yeah, but he's doing his thing with 808, and it's all electronic music, and so it's that he does that, and
I really should say at this point, just interjecting, just Google 808 State. I'm just going to say that. Mic drop. Come back to you, Colin.
And so I'm like, now. And Sue was going, well, why not? You might, if you offer your services as a drummer and percussionist or whatever you want to offer to them, they might just be needing that at the time. What's the worst that can happen? All they can say is no, and you think about something else. So very pragmatic, Sue. So it was fantastic advice, as it turned out, because I rang him up and he said, we've been thinking of getting a drummer. I'm amazed that you've rung us, really, because you'd be perfect, because I really like your drumming.
Did you feel like the heavens were opening, going,
Yeah, and it got better as well, because he said we've got a gig in a month's time in Edinburgh with support in Bjork.
And you're like,
okay, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm like trying to be really cool. Oh yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that'll do. Yeah, that's fine.
And if you don't know who Bjork is, younger listeners, Google her as well.
And they'd worked together. They did a track called Oops in 91 or 92, around then. So they knew each other quite well and had done lots of stuff. So they were on tour together. They did that one gig, and then later on we did a tour, and that brought the Brazil thing back again. So we ended up touring Brazil on the same bill as Bjork. Yeah. That was really interesting, but that's another story. So I did that, and it was amazing. And then we did lots of other gigs, and we went around Europe, and we did all around the UK, and the gigs were great, and lots of really mad gigs. I had this wonderful roadie called Alan who had his front teeth missing, and he'd remember everything. He'd watch me like a hawk during rehearsals, and I wasn't allowed to move my own stuff, so I'd adjust it and get it exactly how he wanted, and he'd mark it all with tape so that the junctions on the stands would be exactly matched, so he could set them up exactly the same as I'd had them in rehearsal. So when I got to the gig, it was like, there it is, ready to go.
Good old Alan, wherever you are now in the world.
Yeah. But Ben, one of the other roadies, could do a Rubik cube in one hand and roll a cigarette in the other.
That's brilliant.
The reason we had Rubik's cubes on tour with us is because, we just thought we'll check to see if they really read our contracts. And it was before I joined them, but they'd already done this. Said, let's put in a clause that says they have to provide a Rubik's Cube because 808 had a song called Cubic. So they thought they linked with that. And let's see who actually manages to provide one. And amazingly, lots of people, particularly on the European gigs, tried really hard to get a Rubik's Cube. And so we ended up with a bus full of Rubik's Cubes, but sometimes they couldn't get a hold of one. So they'd say, we're really sorry, I haven't been able to get a Rubik's Cube, but we've got a game of Connect 4. And so we had all these games on the bus. It was brilliant.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I really wish that they would do more of that now, actually, with people going on tour. And some of the people that I deal with in sort of a musical therapeutic way are people that are exhausted coming back off tour. And it's, we imagine that being in a band is this glamorous, really easy lifestyle. It is one of the hardest lifestyles out there, isn't it?
It's really hard work, because there's tiny proportion of time you're on stage playing the music, which is why you're there. The rest of it is just waiting and hanging about and
traveling.
And never knowing where you are. And and the really hard part of it, and it was hard for me when my kids were born Esme was born in 99, and then Charlie was born in 2002, and you're away from your kids when they're really young, and you're missing their first steps and their first words and all that kind of thing. And so when you come home, you've got to go in a few days, so you're in a permanent state of leaving wherever you are. You're never actually settled. So when you go back on tour, you wishing you were back home, and you're about to be leaving that and going home. So you're always leaving to go from one place to another all the time.
Yeah, and that is actually one of the reasons that I find, again, in the therapeutic sense, that people do turn to vices, because it's the only way they can sort of numb that emotional amplification in that environment.
I think it is
and that homesickness thing is a real thing.
Yeah, it's a common reason, because like you say, numb it. Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, obviously we're sort of touching a little bit on mental health as we're talking about the touring aspect of music. How do you think that music has aided and helped and soothed you mentally? It's
a kind of it's just a go-to for me. It's like if whatever else is happening, I can always pick up an instrument and make some music on it and make some sound, even if it's not a gig or just for myself or whatever. And also there's the communal aspect of playing music with people and improvising and jamming, and just that wonderful thing that happens when a bunch of people play music in the same room, and you get those little sparks across the room where you play something and somebody mirrors it, but inadvertently play the same phrase at the same time as somebody else in the group, and it's like you look at each other as like, how did that happen, And so I think for me it creates a constant, and I sometimes wonder whether everybody needs something like that, and if it's not music, it's something else. It's your art, or it's going for walks in the country, or spending time with people, and it's just, I think as humans we need something that has that function in our lives, that whatever it is. And I think music has got a power because it's about making sound that disappears into the air and it's gone as soon as it's made. It's very present tense. When you paint a piece of artwork, that's a fantastic thing, but you can see it afterwards. And of course, the moment we paint it is a thing in itself, which is amazing. But you leave an impression, a lasting impression. You do when you make a film, and of course you do when you make a record. But when
it never sounds the same though, does it, on records?
No, but then you say it's a permanent thing, but only the physical form of it is permanent, because it has. When you press play, whether it's a CD or an MP3 or something on Spotify, it's still gone when you press stop. So there's something really different about music in terms of creative arts. And I think theatre has a similar impact, because theatre tells a story, and then when it's done, it's gone.
And it's like a fingerprint, isn't it? Because you can go one night, it'll be completely different the next. Yeah,
and it's totally reliant on the connection with the audience.
Absolutely.
Which I think now is really hard, because we're having to learn how to presume there will be a connection via satellite back to somebody's front room. Now we don't have the choice.
Yeah.
At the moment as musicians, because we can't share that thing.
And it's a funny thing, and I was talking to my husband who's in the band with me now, through 2020. Obviously we are musicians. We're incredibly lucky. We've won a couple of awards this year, including the Prestige Awards, which has been fabulous. But through the year we've found it really, really difficult to create online content, because our band is very much an in-the-moment kind of thing. Yeah. And it's something I started asking a couple of my musician friends about. And everyone has struggled with moving their music online or doing live streaming or whatever, because that connection is missing, because you're not having that human interaction, and the alchemy has disappeared, hasn't it?
Yeah, and alchemy is a really good way to describe it. It is exactly that.
And it's the connection factor, isn't it? Yeah, it's that absolute connection in the moment, in the now, immersive experience that we're talking about. Talking of which, I'm going to swing you into a little bit of a tangent. What's your favourite piece of music? And I know that's a really difficult question to answer, so maybe thinking about maybe one of those times when you felt absolutely connected through your music.
Oh my goodness, I don't know.
What springs to mind, like when you think of your bits of music that make you happy or make you sad, or even what you listen to today?
Miles Davis.
What a total legend!
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see him in the early '80s a couple of times.
I'm so jealous, Colin.
Yeah, we used to, when he got his act together again after because he disappeared for most of the '70s. We used to drive up, make a pilgrimage from Manchester. We would hire a van, and loads of us would go up and listen to Miles Davis play live. It was just something about the way. Going back to that word connection again, he made this incredible connection with the purity of his sound, because he didn't use vibrato, which takes us back to that story about the bass player, like
no hiding here. Yeah.
No hiding. And all the trumpet players before him, equally brilliant players like Louis Armstrong and so on, all had this vibrato in their playing, and he did these straight notes, and it cuts straight to your soul, so I think he's a massively influential artist. David Bowie
Obviously.
is another one.
Yeah.
And Sun Ra Orchestra as well.
Yes,
And for if you don't know anything about Sun Ra, he claimed to be from Saturn. His real name was Sonny Blount, and he was an incredibly gifted piano player with a vision of jazz, which was completely different to anybody else's. And he knew the Bible inside out. He used to quote from it quite a lot in his music, but not in a religious sense, but alluding to the sort of mythology rather than the religious aspects of it.
It's absolutely fascinating how people come to music and how they come to that creation of music as well, and have that ability to just send these vibes out into the world and have people really respond quite heavily to them, and to the point where people become obsessed with certain artists or obsessed with tracks. And you can really see how tracks of music can save people's lives. They can change people's lives. I mean, there's a friend of mine, she won't mind me mentioning, that she's recently broke up with her partner. I think the pandemic has tested a lot of people's relationships. I guess so, and she's gone all the way back to her music, and she's listening to Alanis Morissette, I Will Survive, all of this kind of empowering, crazy big fear system music. And it's getting her through probably one of the toughest times of her life. And that's the beauty and the power that I feel when I listen to certain tracks. That there are some tracks I can't even sing. One of them being "Moments of Pleasure" by Kate Bush. One of my favourite artists of all time. And I can't get through the first verse.
It's really hard without getting a lump in your throat, isn't it? But I sang with Vicky Abbott's choir at Eden Projects for a few years.
Wonderful.
And I was singing bass parts, and there were a few songs that I couldn't sing without getting a lump in my throat.
And that never seems to change over time, does it? No matter how many times you challenge yourself to sing it. That emotional connection.
We did a version of "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You" with the sort of Elvis version, but with lovely harmonies and stuff. And it was really hard when it goes to that middle eight, where it turns round, and it was just it's very that's the hardest instrument to play is your voice.
Absolutely.
Because your emotion is so caught up in it.
And we respond so deeply to other people's voices. And I find it's quite interesting. I'm quite a synesthetic person. So when I hear music, I don't just hear it, I see it at the same time. And there are some tracks and some artists' voices that I can't physically listen to because the visual that comes with that voice is so grating on me that I can't listen to it. So to take an example, I can't listen to Adele. And there's a tone in her voice that when I'm listening to it, the visual that comes with that and the colour that comes with that is like a spike.
It's interesting. I used to struggle with listening to Elvis Costello because he has that sneer in his voice. You know, and the voice goes right up to the top behind the nose and in the roof of the mouth.
It's the Bob Dylan effect, I call it.
We used to call Bob Dylan the singing Hoover. Because he went through a Hoover phase, didn't he? Where he went,
totally.
But
incredible songwriter.
I got into Dylan later on. My dad used to love Dylan. I could never understand why I liked him, and I realised I wasn't much of a lyric person. I didn't listen to lyrics very much, and when I started to listen to his lyrics, and play with people who really love Dylan. So I played with a singer called Denise Marie for quite a while, who's now in Holland. She loved Dylan, so she kind of got me into Dylan, really. And she said, listen to the words, and it was like, wow, this guy paints pictures with his words, you know.
And do you know what? That's such a funny thing, you know, talking about musicians coming up today. One of the things that when I'm doing a masterclass or something and the person isn't connecting emotionally to what they're singing because they're so vulnerable in their voice, I say to them, you know, what's the song about? And 9 times out of 10, they can't know. They don't know off the bat, and they have to really think about it. And then when they realise what the song's about and they go, oh, that's why I like it, then that extra layer of connection changes. It's really, really interesting, isn't it, music? I could talk to you about this all day long, but I'm going to take you off on another tangent now.
Okay.
So, if you were in a zombie apocalypse, Colin, what 3 instruments would you save, and what would you use as a weapon, and where would you be?
So, what 3 instruments would I save? Well, I suppose because I'm into the pedal steel at the moment, I'd probably save that because I'd need something to obsess about. I don't know how it would work in terms of maybe they wouldn't like the sound it made. It'd be too pleasant, so it'd scare them off. I don't. Does it have to have a purpose?
No.
Okay, so I've got a drum that I really like called a brekete, which is two-headed bass drum, which you hit with a bent stick. It's a sort of West African drum. It has a snare across it as well, so it has this thunderous sound to it, which I love. I'd probably need a guitar, maybe not two percussion instruments. I'd probably need a pedal steel, a drum, and maybe a bass guitar. Probably would do me. What would I use as a weapon, and where would I be? Well, I'd probably hold myself up at Trago Mills, because there's loads of stuff in there, isn't there?
Trago Mills, for our overseas friends, is like a big department. I can't even describe Trago Mills. Lots of departments in one place.
Yeah, I don't particularly like Trago Mills, but I think it would definitely be the place to be if there was a zombie apocalypse.
They do have a great deal happening.
Whatever I wanted to kill or hit them with, it would be in there. So I'd have everything I needed, wouldn't I? And they've got a music store in there as well, haven't they?
They do.
Crappy ukuleles, so I could play tunes on those as well.
I think the zombies would run a mile because you're surrounded by all this crazy sound.
Yeah.
No brains for tea for them. So on the back of this zombie apocalypse, unfortunately you have perished, but you're being reincarnated as we speak.
Right.
What 3 things, memories or skills would you like to take into your next life?
Well, I definitely still want to be a musician. In terms of memories, I wouldn't like to be in my next life and forget my family. So I definitely want to remember my wonderful family. And probably the ability to swim. I'd like that to start straight away from scratch rather than have to relearn it again.
Wonderful answers. Swim out from the room. Love it. You said that you've recently been learning the pedal steel. Do you think that you can pick up a musical instrument at any point in your life and learn it? Or do you think it's something that you have to have in your brain from a young age?
I think there's a lot of factors that there's a lot of nature nurture debate goes on around that. But I think the common thing that does have to happen is that you have to put in the graft. The 10,000 hours genius theory. Malcolm Gladwell is often misquoted as.
Yes.
When people quote that, they forget the amount of motivation you have to have, and
massively
when it doesn't work, you have to get back on the bike. You have to start again, and the resources you have around you, and the resources you create for yourself, and the time you put in, the patience you have, the diligence. That's what you're not going to get to your 10,000 hours unless you've got all those things in place. That's what I think anyway. So I don't know if there's such a thing as a gifted musician, but you do occasionally get people who just go, wow, where did that come from?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but I don't think it's just about music. I think it's about any skill.
I absolutely agree with that. What advice would you give to younger people that are thinking about taking up music? Like, what would be the one thing that you wish that you'd known at their age that maybe you didn't?
Say yes to every opportunity that's thrown your way, and make your own opportunities as well. And don't be afraid of asking for help.
And that's a big deal, isn't it? That asking for help.
Yeah. And get out there and just show it to people and play to people and get some feedback, because that's where that feedback loop happens. Yeah. And of course it's different at the moment because of the pandemic. But you can still get feedback. You can get likes and follows and social media, and get people. You can do live streams. You can put your music on Twitch and do streams there where you actually get any interaction live. You can go for it. Be patient with yourself, and look for support.
And surrender to the process of that as well, because
absolutely.
It is a process. It's not going to happen overnight, and it does take a lot of time and effort, doesn't it? And self-motivation, massive deal.
And I think keep a journal as well, and write down things that people say, because
that's a really good tip.
Because people say things that seem really obvious at the time, and you forget them, or you try and paraphrase it. And it's like, I call it Brian Cox syndrome. So it's like when he explains the universe with golf balls and eggs and things. And you go, like, well, yeah, that makes total sense. I really understand now. And then and you try and tell somebody later on what the program's
you
about.
Just say golf balls.
Well, you had these golf
eggs.
Balls and eggs, and it made sense at the time. And I think it's like that when people say things to you that are inspiring, you kind of go, yeah, I'll definitely do that. And afterwards you go, what was it again? You know.
That's the journalist in you coming out, isn't it?
So I think write things down, and actually not just what people say to you, but what you overhear as well. So if you sit somewhere in a crowded, well, you can't sit in a crowded room anymore, can you? Yeah. But, you know, when we can again,
yes.
You know, write the daft things that people say down. Because that guy who was a writer who worked with Biting Tongues, Ken Hollins, you know, he used to sit in a pub and just write down things that people said. And when he put them in the context of the music, it was just like, wow, that's brilliant. But it was something that somebody really said in a pub or a cafe, you know, on a bus.
You'd make a good comedian. All this human observation. So we are coming to the end of the interview, sadly, but obviously it's called The Brave Moment. So I really want you to tell our audience what has been your bravest moment and why. Okay,
well, I think I've given this some thought, and I think that for me, I didn't know it was a brave moment, but I think it was when I moved to Cornwall and left everything that I'd known in Manchester behind, you know, because everything in my life had been about being in Manchester. I never thought I'd leave. I didn't do the traditional route of going to university and locate in a new city, like a lot of people do, and then they just stay. I didn't do that. So everybody sort of I knew had done that, or I'd grown up with. So Manchester was the place I was always going to be. And it was such a brilliant place. So to suddenly uproot myself, but based on a whim of it will be great to live somewhere else, was a massive thing for me, because I was already 34 by the time I moved. So when I got to Cornwall, the only people I knew were the members of Knee High Theatre, who I'd worked with a bit, and Sue. And I found myself in Calstock, staying at Phil Spur's house.
Wonderful.
So there I was in Calstock, in this freezing cold house with condensation on the inside of the windows and rain on the outside, so wet on both sides. Looking out this window, looking at these cows standing on a practically vertical hill, and just going, what the bloody hell am I doing here? And I spent hours ringing everybody I knew in Manchester, just going, you know, it's I don't know what I'm going to do with myself here, you know. But I didn't think of it as brave. You can look at bravery in retrospect, but I think anybody does a brave thing, they're not thinking, whoa, I'm brave. They're just responding to a change in whatever's happening in their lives at the time. And it might be split second, like rescuing somebody from a disaster, or it might be a big change in your life. But I think the actual sort of brave aspect of it was afterwards. It's like, okay, how am I going to kind of rebuild things here?
We always say on the brave moment that it's after the action. The action is the brave part, isn't it? It's just that leap of faith into what it is that you're doing at the time, and then your values evolve from that place onwards. And then, like you said, in retrospect, you go, wow, you know what? I did that.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And I think the learning to swim again thing was probably a brave thing as well, because I'm terrified of water and still am. But I can put my head under now and get the goggles on, and I'm not actually afraid of it anymore, you know, in that way. So I had to be very pragmatic about it. You know, it's only water.
And you have to flow with it, don't you? Like, I think... I can't remember who it was. It was the guy that did the Miracle of Water book. He said one of the biggest mistakes that we have when we go into the water is we try and fight it. And if there's a wave that's taking us under, we try and fight the wave. But if you go with it, you'll always come back up. And that's kind of a nice metaphor for what you've been going through.
Yeah.
So my final question to you is, I want you to imagine that you are at the side of your 100-year-old self, and your 100-year-old self is giving you a piece of advice for right now. What does he say?
Stop messing about and get on with it. Stop procrastinating. Stop looking at your phone.
I can imagine him pointing his finger at all of the world saying that as well.
Yeah. Or he might be looking back at a time when we all took so many things for granted.
Yeah.
And assumed that we'd always have mobile phones and that we'd be able to store information on the cloud, as we call it.
The cloud, the mystical cloud.
And he might be looking back at a time from a sort of Mad Max of information rather than petrol thing, and where chalk and blackboards are the most sought after resource.
The devolution of the world.
Yeah, people would kill each other for a piece of chalk, because there are no mobile phones and there's no wireless anywhere. So.
And on that note, I think we shall finish this wonderful interview. You only have to Google Colin's name and you will be bombarded with a plethora of Mancunian musical history and celebrity. For such a well-versed man of music, Colin is incredibly humble and approachable and rarely ever speaks about his own success, rather focusing his attention on other people's. So to get an interview expressing even a minute portion of his life has left me with a big smile on my face, and many others, I'm sure. Watching Colin light up when he talks about playing instruments or learning something new is a testament to the passion and energy he has put into the craft. When you have a conversation with him, you walk away determined to up your game or inspired to take on new things. He is a walking encyclopedia of musical history, again reflecting his deep understanding of it both instrumentally and empathically, knowing exactly what musicians have to go through in order to create what they create. No matter where Colin is in his life, he expands his mind and challenges his body to try new things. He understands that no matter what age you are, you should never give up and surrender to what's expected of you. And if learning to swim and playing a new instrument will help maintain your vital life energy, then do it. Looking to his father for inspiration, a man who lived a diverse and vibrant existence, Colin continues to surprise and delight all who meet him. Never will the word boring be applied to someone like him. Oh no. Colin plays with life, plays with creative energy, and plays with the human condition. He cherishes his life force with yoga, swimming, and new ideas, and steadily conquers fears in favour of beginner's mind, flow states, and eventual evolutions in the way he lives his life, even if that means leaving a vast city full of friends in favour of a coastal life in pursuit of creating a loving family. Now helping the next generation of musicians find their foothold in the industry, you can see just how much these young and aspiring musicians adore him. Colin is never afraid to adapt his knowledge to new realms, be it gigging on a Friday night in an exceptional band to teaching percussive rudiments on a Monday morning. He believes that the acknowledgement of bravery comes after each decisive, active moment, and that is something we believe here on the Brave Moment as well. So here is a little acronym of the word brave that can be applied to literally anything in your life, from getting out of bed in the morning to climbing Mount Everest. The B stands for begin. That beginning may be a thought such as, today I'll begin my new journey to a stronger body, or today I'll begin by looking at my finances, etc., etc. The R stands for research. So now I'll look at some motivating videos or buy a book or download a health app or a finance app. Next comes the big one, action. You've mentally decided on that next step of your journey. You've done a bit of research, and now maybe you think to yourself, okay, I'll try walking for 5 minutes, or I'll pick up the phone and speak to a personal trainer, or I'll start by putting £10 away each week in a savings account instead of buying coffees or a takeaway. Sooner or later, the more you practice the big A that balances right in the middle of the word brave and therefore becomes the gateway to completion of brave acts, you tip the scales towards V for values. Your values change as a consequence of your research and actions. Now, you may value the energy you feel from nourishing food, or you may be able to pay for the holiday of your dreams, which expands your knowledge of the world. And pretty soon, as your personal values change, you start to feel the final letter E, empowered, evolved, and elevated. Before you know it, you'll look back at the way you used to live and think, wow, was I really that heavy? Or could I really lose money that quickly? I don't even recognize that person anymore. And then you better get ready for that recognition from other people that may be astonished or inspired or even proven wrong by your story. And that is when people say, you must have had to be really brave to face yourself and change. And when you answer that question, you'll always be able to look back and find that moment where you chose to begin or be something new, where you chose to follow your gut instinct and took that all-important action towards that new set of values in your world. Colin chose a life dedicated to music and took big action to make music work for him. He chose the beautiful coast of Cornwall, even when he wasn't sure what would happen next. But through his consistent positive action, he has a great set of personal values and evolves with every year that passes. He is absolute proof that if we choose to, we can all do the same. As Marl Manson says, bravery is feeling the fear, the doubt, the insecurity, and deciding that something else is more important. So close your eyes, take a breath, clear your mind, and decide, will the next moment be your bravest? All you have to do is begin. Next week on the show, we speak to neurodivergent poet and politician Margaret Corvid on political poetry, autism, and performing. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show. If you have a spare moment now, please like, subscribe, and tell me your thoughts in a review on Apple Podcasts, which will really help other people like yourself to find the show. Of course, you can also share the show with your friends by following us at the Brave Moment Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or on Twitter at Moment Brave, or just follow the Linktree on all of our social media platforms. It's been so wonderful to have you all here with me again. Please get in touch with your own stories, and remember, your brave moment starts now.